Hey, welcome to another video about my Maserati. In this video I'm going to be looking at my lowered spring kit. Now if you recall, in a previous video I bought those H&R lowering springs second hand, and now it's time to fit them. Now on the forum someone made the comment that it took them 4 hours to change all the springs on the car and get it back on the road. I'm not so sure that's an accurate time. I mean, I spend at least an hour making tea, eating chocolate, staring at the car and going ugh and swearing. So we'll see how long it takes me. I'm not hopeful for anything under a few days. Anyhow, hopefully this video is going to be useful to you and interesting to you, and if you get to the end and you think, yeah, that wasn't too bad, the guy's not too annoying, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks very much. So here I am at the rear shock. So you've got 4 bolts up the top. This car's got sky hooks, so you have to unlink the little cable in the boot, which means taking out all the boot stuff. Again, it's nice and easy to do when you just pull the plug. In the boot, there is the sky hook sensor, right in the corner of the wheel arch there. I searched everywhere for it. And down there. So 4 bolts up the top here, and then the big bolt down the bottom here to secure the shock. I don't like the fact that this bolt down here is very tight and struggles around because it's being pushed by the spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit my spring compressors, and being me, these are my spring compressors, a couple of ratchet straps.
So I had the normal type of spring compressors that you normally buy, the Hilker type, but I just found that they're too big for these springs, because these springs are quite small diameter, and they just scratched them up quite a bit. Whereas these ratchet straps just work really, really well. If you use a little bit of protection underneath the ratchet, you won't scratch those springs at all. And you can't really knock anything off or have a sudden sort of spring calamity where it goes pinging off or something like that. And it's easier to get into that tight confined space there where you haven't got a lot of room to work in. So the jack just helps take the pressure off of that bottom bolt that holds the spring all in place. There's like a serrated sleeve that goes inside the hole where the bolt goes through, and it's just nice to take the pressure off and not tear it up.
Right, there's a washer in here that goes behind this bolt. So once you get the spring in, the spring goes here and then the washer goes on the end there to keep everything nice and centered in the clamp. I'm trying not to put my head in the shot too much because I haven't washed my hair for 2 or 3 days. I'm not that vain, but I look foul. I look like some kind of greasy monkey, and it's just not nice. And I can't be asked to go and do anything about it because I'm trying to get this all done, and I'm annoyed because I struggled with the roll bar links this morning quite badly. So in the previous video I mentioned this, and I was talking about if you do ever do a project like this, if you're someone who's thinking, oh, I can save a ton of money, I can do the project myself, and it will be fun and enjoyable, do just bear in mind that often it's not that fun.
Most projects, technology development, or even just human activity goes through a sort of process like I've shown in this very crude graph here, where basically at the start you have tons and tons of motivation and joy, and then as reality sets in, you end up in this valley of despair. Before finally, if you carry on pushing, you get to the end and you finally get that progress and the reward. The real trick I find is to just chip away while you're in that valley of despair and make sure you just carry on pushing and doing a little bit every day so that you can finally get to that wonderful point at the end.
Right, so now all the bolts are out and it should lift out fairly easy. Why did it come out like that? You've got to be careful not to damage this skyhook wire. So there is one shock assembly out. So I say you've got to be careful not to damage this wire, because then I end up with a skyhook warning. And
original adjustable shocks like were on the early GTs are now unobtainable, so you really got to be careful of them.
Right, this one looks, it's a bit manky, it's a bit rusty. Well, this is aluminium, so this is a bit rusty and it's gone on there. So I'm going to paint all these up, which means I'll probably fit this back tomorrow. It'd be nice to get this one all fitted back, because this is the sort of easier bit to do, whereas the front I'm probably still going to do the bushes, even though I've realised that perhaps the bushes weren't the problem. Anyway, never mind, that's a nightmare for another moment. With this you need a nice deep socket spanner like this. It can go nice deep like that. And the reason is because that's got to go over there like that, and then there's two flats on the side of this that you can get. I'm using an 11mm spanner. I can't imagine it's a 10. It doesn't fit very nice though, so I might just go and get my adjustable in a second. Yeah, I'm going to go and get my adjustable before I damage that. It's not supposed to be done up very tight, this one. Someone's been in to change these springs. They're quite new, hence these will be going on eBay. But obviously they've over tightened this bit. It's only about 35 Newton meters, I think. There she goes. Good. If you're anything like me, then I think fit and lowering springs, perhaps you could do it in an amount of time, something like 8 hours or 6 hours. If you've got a 4-post ramp, I suppose that makes a massive, or a 2-post ramp, that makes a massive difference, you know. Do it on your drive. I mean, it takes you half an hour at least to sort out the car, get it on its jacks, and then turn it around and get it on jacked on the other side. And of course I'm going to be loosening off all the wishbone bolts, and I'm doing the wishbone bushes, don't forget, as well. That takes a lot of time.
When you change the ride height this much, you really should loosen off the wishbone bushes, because otherwise you're distorting and twisting the wishbone bushes permanently, because obviously the control arms will be in a different position. So you have to load up the suspension like this and then undo those bushes, you know, the control arm bolts, and then redo them up again.
So nut comes off. Yeah, this is called the hyper block. All my hyper blocks have been in absolutely perfect condition, so I didn't need to change them. They're about 40 quid each, so I'm quite happy I don't. And there's a washer. So nut, washer, then hyper block. Then, as I've said, another bit, tapered washer, which was put the wrong way up. I've just taken it off like that, haven't I? Yeah, so the last people didn't put their little ridge recess down onto the clip. So I guess the danger is if that clip got damaged or come out or got forced out, then the rod could just go up, and that might not cause too much hassles because it's only the pressure of the gas, not the pressure of the spring, but still you could end up denting your bonnet or something. So they put that back on wrong, so just make sure you get that little recess in there face down. I'll stick them somewhere where I can lose them and then spend an hour swearing and complaining, wondering where the bits are. So then in here we've got the bump stop. Now I made the mistake of not putting my new bump stops in place. I'm hoping they're going to go in place on their own, or I'm going to have to find some way of pushing up inside and pushing them in like that. Never mind, I figured out. Yeah, so this one's not so bad. A bit of corrosion around here. You get rid of that and it's actually quite good metal underneath. So I'm going to paint all of this with Bonder Rust primer. I did have proper etch primer for aluminium, but I think in this case I'm just going to use Bonder Rust, which does sort of work on aluminium okay. And then I'm going to put a load of grease. It's just because the salt and everything must get sprayed up in here. It hasn't happened on the fronts, only on the rears. And my Volvo, they completely corroded out and broke the other day, and I had to replace both of them. Volvo's ones are piddly little things. Anyhow, so I'll clean all this up, get this painted, and then tomorrow it'll be ready to reassemble. Use a wire brush in the angle grinder and a sanding pad to get this all clean. So I use the sanding pad first, because otherwise the wire brush just polishes up the corrosion rather than removing it. You can particularly get that in steel. You think you've cleaned it all, you've got nice wire brush finish, and then you touch it with a grinder disc and immediately it all goes red, dust again, and you realize you've literally just polished up. Even with the big angle grinder wire brushes, you've just literally polished up the surface of the rust. Anyway, that's that spring off. So then you've got the seat down here, and obviously I've got the adjustable seats on these, which is now a bit of a pain because it means I've got to judge what to do, whereas other people, of course, don't have to. Rather than just ping this open and have the spring go like this really quick, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold this catch. I'm going to take up tension as if I'm tightening it up, and then pull this catch back slightly, and then just release it back, and then let it catch again, and literally just use the ratchet to back it off. And then it went and did it like that, and that's not so bad. Right, so there's the old springs. That one's the old spring, alongside the new springs. So H&R 28962, and it says R for rear. These are obviously progressive springs because you've got the wider gaps here and then the thinner here. So they're quite cool, these new springs. They're actually progressive ones, not the front ones. The front one back there is the same. Now, for some reason, it's sort of logical. The lowering spring is actually the same height as the normal spring, but these are stiffer, obviously. No, it still doesn't make sense. Anyhow, once they're under load, obviously they go to a different height than the original springs, because these are suitable for cars also that have got the fixed spring seats, whereas mine's adjustable. Yes, you can see the front springs there are considerably shorter than the stock front springs by a couple of inches. And also they're not progressive, they're just straightforward standard ready steady rate or whatever springs.
So this is how I cleaned up those spring seats. I used my favourite tool, the angle grinder. I used the flap disc at first to get all the corrosion off and get it back to pretty much flat metal. But then there's a few craters that I just had to get that little bit of corrosion out of the aluminium, and I just used a standard steel wire brush for that, which is fine because I'm going to paint it. I mean, normally you wouldn't use a steel wire brush on aluminium because you get steel embedded in the aluminium, but when you're painting it, it doesn't matter. With the front shock absorbers, what you have to do is you have to remove the upper control arm first in order to get the space to get the shock absorber out. So first job to do once you got the wheel off really is to count the shims. So the bushes where they go into the subframe, they have shims each side of them to line up the control arm properly. It's quite important to take these out, stack them on the side carefully, and make sure you put them back into the same place that they came from. You can then take out the bolts for the control arm and just spin it round like this, and that will give you the space you need to undo the four top bolts, the bottom bolt, and lift that shock absorber out.
So here is the difficult shock absorber. This thing would not move. I mean, it really would not move. I soaked it for a couple of days while I was doing other bits. The locking ring came undone relatively easily, but this bit would just not move. It was absolutely seized. I ended up using a cold chisel to try and budge it up the 7mm I needed, and it's done it, but it hardly moves at all. It's obviously galled up in there. It's not going to come undone. I don't really need the locking ring anymore. Anyhow, I've tied it up as best I can. I'm trying to find a new one, because you see, if I could cut this all the way down there, I could easily get it off. Cut down there almost to the threads, cut down the other side almost to the threads, and then it would undo naturally, and then I could get a new one on. Trying to find a new one's really difficult, but it will have to do for now because I can't wait for a new one unless I go and buy a whole shock absorber off eBay. but then you're talking 200 quid to buy someone's knackered shock absorber just for a collar, which I don't really fancy doing. So we'll see. So anyhow, this is the bush coming off now. So I've got the bigger socket, a 36mm socket on one side. I've tidied up this a bit. Hopefully in the vise, if I just hit on the edge of the vise there when it's under full tension, it should start to move.
And yes, that did actually get it started. Just start the thing moving so I could then go on to my other techniques.
Alright, so I'm just trying to remove this bushing now. So what I've done is I've sanded this a little bit flat, just down, almost touching the aluminium of the shock absorber. That's because the edge here will have a little bit of rust and it will be difficult to get through that hole and push that way. So this socket's bigger, it's a 35mm, and this is just an inch socket. So this is smaller than the hole and this is bigger than the hole. So it should be able to push that bush straight inside to that socket. That's the hope. It worked on the car, which was considerably more difficult. So it should work here out like this. Alright, so now I'm tightening up and I think it's started to move. It will keep on slipping around in this vise, which is annoying. I'm sure that's starting to move a bit. Oh, I didn't want to have the end of this, but never mind.
So this is a sort of technique that I use to do this. I tighten it up and then hit it with a hammer, and that just gets it shifting. And then you tighten it up again, hit it with a hammer. You don't have to hit it very hard, but it just gives it that little bit of a bit of a shock that just helps it move a bit easier.
Straight in there, you see? And you can see this is why it goes quite tight. It's got the rust marking around there, and when something rusts, the oxygen gets into the iron and makes it a much bigger sort of molecule, and therefore it expands, because obviously oxygen add in the iron, or iron add in the oxygen, it just becomes bigger and it exfoliates and pushes out. So the next one's probably going a lot easier. Not too bad in there. You can see a couple of score marks where it's pushed out. That's the actual bush pushing out. That should be good. Clean that up and then I just push the next one in. These shocks are not in, they're in shocking condition. No. The only thing is someone was selling a set of shocks, fully adjustable brand new shocks for £1,000 the other day. Springs, everything, all included. I'd have had to have deleted the sky hook because they were non-sky hook and they were aftermarket ones, but you look at them and you think, yeah, well, one day if these go, maybe that's what I'll do. Right, so I don't want to push on that bit there. I want to push on the outside of the bearing because obviously that's actually rubber mounted and moves like this, you see. So I've got a socket again. It's a little bit too big, but that's good because it should sit over the outer side. And then I'm going to go for some sort of flat plate on here will do for now. Actually, I suppose if I take that off there. Oh, get confused now. Something like that.
So just in case you're wondering, this is sped up 10 times. I mean, imagine if you could actually work this fast. This would be really cool. Everything would get done so quickly. Oh, if only everything in life was as simple as just pressing the fast forward button, eh?
This is not a huge amount of fun doing these sorts of jobs. Seeing her in this state. No shock absorber. And no shock absorber. But hopefully a couple more days. Well, and she'll be completely finished both sides. That'll be cool. So here's my ratchet straps. Seem to be working quite well, even on the front shock absorbers. So mine are going 21 centimeters from the base of there to this end of this ridge thing here. So you've got the soft bit with the Maserati sticker, you've got a little concave bit going down to the main tube here, and that I'm going to run to 21 centimeters. It's at 20 now. I've got to wind up another centimeter. And the reason is because then the car's going to be about 5mm higher, I think it is. I think I'm doing it 5mm higher than, I might be doing it spot on, I don't know. But as I say, someone already played around with mine. So, yeah, I've got to run it this way, and another centimetre. Someone had already played around. Someone had already played around with my shocks. So, I'm not quite sure what the original stock setting is. But I'm going to run it at 21, so that should give me about 2 centimetres clearance from the top of the tyre to the wheel arch, which I think will look quite nice. I'm at 20.5, and now we're on 21 dead. So that's where I'm going to lock it off. I really should get some spanners that are the right size. I'm not going to do it too tight because I'm going to do the rest of the adjustment on the car. Yeah, the rest of the adjustment. Check it on the car. And I need that actually. The other thing is what I want to try and do is line up that with the base so it doesn't kink it in the mount, because I've realised that it does turn and kink in the mount if you're not careful. So I'm just using my big spanner here on the base here to just try and get that right. Yeah, it's turning quite nice actually. Just make sure they're straight. Straightish. And what I've done though is by putting a little bit of grease on the seat here and a little bit of grease on here, I reckon when it's in the car and settling on the suspension, that will allow things to move a little bit so that that bottom shock bush, which they call a ball joint, isn't twisted off. So hopefully that's this one done. I'm ready to go on the car.
Once all that's done, it's time to get the thing back up in place and put the 4 bolts at the top to secure it in place, not forgetting to reconnect your skyhook cable. Also, when you put the wishbone in, do remember that it should be done under load. So the important thing here is that then your bushes aren't twisted and under a constant torsional stress. Now, this is the sort of crap I was talking about last week.
So I just had to cut this blimmin' bush off. So it's the bush that goes in there, and it's a floating bush that you then bolt the shock absorber on with. Because my new shock bush is 0.5 millimetre wider or whatever, not worn essentially. This needs to be pushed out in order to let the shock absorber go in, but it's completely seized. So I've had to cut it off. I'm cutting through it now, and I'm hoping I'm going to release it. I can't hammer it too much, because of course if I hammer it too much I'm going to wreck this control arm. And then I've got a £1,200 bill and a load more work. So I'm hoping I'm almost through now and ready to push out. I won't cut all the way through, but that should release enough tension that hopefully the bush will knock out. At last. So this is the offending bush here. You can see I've just cracked it actually. I haven't actually cut through the aluminium at all. So you've got the full saw blade width there. And you see, it just sort of split it quite nicely. And then the new one looks like this. Right, so you can see, it's a bit windy so this audio might be rubbish, but you can see that she is quite a lot lower now on the rear. She's got pretty good stance. Only slight problem is that by lowering by, I've only gone down by about 2 centimeters, you can see that the camber now has gone quite far in. I mean, the front's a little bit cambered, the rear's really cambered in. Looks almost as bad as the Volvo's camber. The Volvo's designed to be that way. Oh my god, this one's even worse actually. I mean, she needs four-wheel alignment. She urgently needs the four-wheel alignment, because that tyre is now, I don't know if you can see that, but now it's very much sitting over on the inner edge In fact, there's actually daylight underneath the outer edge there. So that camber is quite serious. It really is. So she's going to need the alignment done just to sort out that thing. But I think I've got the right amount of space over the top. So I've actually lowered it less than what I think they say, because I've upped the rear suspension by about 8mm, and I upped the front by 8mm actually as well. So, but I mean the front is sitting pretty much where it was before. Maybe it's a little bit too low. It looks wrong because the bumper's all twisted. You can see my bumper's really out now from that other thing. But I don't think generally that's too bad. I just need to get all the alignment done, but it's a question of trying to find somewhere that does four-wheel alignment properly, including the camber. So I'm going to have a look at that. But yeah, she does sit a little bit lower at the back now. She's perhaps a little bit more better balanced than she was.